Mulch is a surprisingly simple fix to many of the challenges we're facing as the climate bounces between extremes of drought and deluge. It gracefully handles scarcity and overabundance of water in the landscape. It ticks so many boxes as a simple solution to a laundry list of challenges that we experience in our landscapes. There's a lot of conflicting information about mulch out there. For this talk, my information centers mainly on the research done by Dr. Jim Downer, a horticulture and plant pathology advisor with the University of California Cooperative Extension. His research of 35 plus years focused on mulch, soil microbiology, and disease suppression in mulched soils. I'm going to lean into his abundant research to talk to you about how to maximize the benefits of mulch to our landscapes. The main thrust of this talk is water conservation. I hope to inspire you tonight to future-proof your landscape by weaning it off of its dependence on the drinking water supply. I'm going to propose to you that you think about landscape water in a different way. Mulching can help you set up your landscape so that it thrives no matter how little or how much water shows up for us. Take a walk in any open space, regional, state, or federal park in this state, and you'll see stunning landscapes that get no supplemental water during the dry season. Winter rains soak into the earth, and litter fall and decomposition are the processes that ensure the water remains available to the plants during the dry season. Nature does an impeccable job of leveraging that free water that falls from the skies 6 months out of the year in California. Can we emulate that with mulch? I say yes. Let's dive into how we can leverage the magic of mulch to its utmost to transform our landscapes. I want to give you a few key concepts here that I'd like you to keep in mind as we're going through the talk. Soil organisms make it possible for plants to uptake nutrients into their tissues. Mulch attracts, feeds, and sustains beneficial soil organisms. Mulch and low water plants are the 1-2 punch of water conservation. Mulch protects the landscape from drought and deluge. And lastly, mulch turns the landscape into a compost factory and a water storage container. Now I'm going to tell you about the many benefits of mulch. In these next 2 slides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to list out many, many benefits of mulch, and I've color-coded each one. The black ones are benefits that I'll be covering in this talk, and the gray ones are ones that I don't. So here we go. Mulch holds moisture in the soil. Dr. Downer said in a webinar in 2020, when you put a healthy layer of mulch on top of the soil, you can pretty much skip every other irrigation. Wow. Mulch feeds the biological life in the soil. It regulates soil temperature. It suppresses soil-borne diseases. It reduces weeds. A minimum of 3 inches of mulch will suppress weeds quite well. It contributes to sequestering of carbon. It invigorates failing plant material. It mends and restores compacted and hydrophobic soils. It buffers soil against pH changes and salinity. And I have another one. We got some more. Mulch may increase water infiltration rate. It minimizes the need for fertilizer. It improves stormwater retention. It harvests and stores rainwater. It protects humans from contact with gray water. It improves soil structure. It prevents erosion. It promotes more and stronger plant roots. And it builds communities. Just share a mulch load with your neighbors. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later. So what is mulch? Let's talk about what mulch is here. Mulch is a material that's applied to the surface of the soil to act as a cover. In nature, we call this duff or leaf litter. In these next 3 slides, what I'm going to do is talk about the different materials that mulch can consist of. First and foremost, now this is the type of mulch that I'll be really stressing and really trying to talk you guys into using, because this is the absolute cream of the crop of the mulches. And what it is it's freshly chipped arborist wood chips. This is the absolute best choice. Fresh, uncomposted, chopped tree trimming chips, also called arborist chips. Okay, so if the mulch came from a source that's similar to this photo that's in the top right part of this slide, that is the mulch that we're talking about. Trees got trimmed or cut down or whatever, and they took the parts of the tree and they put it through the shredder and it chipped out all of it, and then you get it right away. That's when it is the absolute best mulch that you could possibly have. The second choice would be recycled green waste from waste management facilities. Now, this is the green waste from the green bins that we put the green waste in the green bins, and the waste management company comes along with the big truck and takes it to a facility where they process it into mulch. Now, it's a second choice instead of a first choice, because it has already gone to the yard, and we don't know what the origin of this mulch is. We don't know exactly where it came from. Oftentimes it's got trash in it, like glass or plastic or metal, and it can possibly be a source of pests or diseases as well. And then also, it's not a good carbon source, and we'll be talking about carbon a little bit later. It's not a good carbon source for microbial activity because it's already been sitting in a pile for a while. So it's all the composting process has already started somewhere else. But this is our second choice. And then the third choice would be bark of trees or shrubs. Now, bark is it's hydrophobic, it's stronger, so it resists getting broken down by soil microbes. So that's why it's really not either our first or our second choice, because it doesn't offer the benefits that the two above do. So it will not add significant nutrients to the soil like the above two do. It takes a long time to break down, and it doesn't promote soil microbial activity. So I'll be saying a couple of times in this talk, just lay down these arbor chips, and here comes nature to get it. Here come the microbes to get it. This does not really happen with bark mulch. So this is not a preferred method, but it's a type of mulch that you'll see out there. Another type of mulch would be pine needles. Now, pine needles, contrary to popular opinion, they do not make the soil acidic. They don't acidify the soil. But the best mulches are coarse and chunky, and pine needles are not that, but you can use pine needles. Then we have straw or hay, and straw is better as hay has too many seeds. And straw is pretty light, so it can blow around in the wind. And this photo, Greg gave me this photo. He'll be coming out a little bit later and talking a little bit about his own experience with mulch. And he provided this to me. I think this is our garden. So straw or hay are another possibility. Shredded wood products or shredded lumber. The Now this, you see this a lot offered in bags of mulch and also in bulk, is that it's often it's construction lumber that has been chipped down, shredded. So the particles can be sharp and splintery, and they could have toxic chemicals on it because it's construction waste. A lot of times they use pallets for these. Okay, so now this part is mulch materials that are not so desirable. And this is stone, rock, or gravel. Now, stone, rock, and gravel, they don't add anything beneficial to the soil, and that's why they're not so desirable, because the arbor chips especially add a lot to the soil. They call in the beneficial microbes, and then nature happens, and all of these processes go to work. That doesn't happen with stone, rock, or gravel. So a consideration, however, a major consideration with stone, rock, and gravel is for firescaping. And I'll be talking about that in just a little bit. It's best used for plants that are native to the desert or the coast because they're used to having rocks or gravel around them and not decomposing wood around them. Okay. Compost is also used as mulch, and this is not desirable because it's too fine in texture. So it not only supports weed growth, but it promotes weeds. So and it breaks down too quickly. So it's really not good to use compost as a mulch. And we have dyed mulches, and people often ask about these because they're readily available at the soil yards and also in bags, to buy them in bags. I couldn't find any research that said anything about the dyes being harmful to anything, to plants, soil, or microbes. But so the dyes can be harmless, and these mulches are usually made from construction debris. So the drawbacks of construction debris used as mulches apply here for the dyed mulches. And then we have rubber mulches. These are not only costly, but the rubber contains chemicals that are toxic to the soil. And then lastly, we have sheet mulching. Now, sheet mulching gets an honorable mention here mainly because it's a popular solution for getting rid of turf grass or weeds. The idea of sheet mulching is to smother the unwanted plants and let them compost in place. It involves cardboard or newspaper, compost, and mulch that are laid down in various layers. And there are various recipes for how much to do and which layer to do next. And there's a lot of recipes out there. And we sheet mulched the Richmond Low Water Demonstration Garden at the Richmond Civic Center. We sheet mulched 8,000 square feet there of landscaping. We did that back in 2019 because it was when we took it over in 2018, it was a virtual weed patch. So this is a wonderful place to visit. We sheet mulched everything there except for the succulent garden. And it's a wonderful place for you to visit if you want to see low water plants and mulch in action. It is a beautiful thing. Now that the cardboard has broken down, it's a great living example of everything we're covering in this talk today. So if you come to the Richmond Civic Center on Fridays between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., Brian, Dan, or another master gardener can show you around. Okay, now that you know what mulch is, I'm going to show you what mulch is not. Wheat cloth is not mulch. Wheat cloth only suppresses weeds for a limited time. Then the weed seeds blow in and germinate on top of the mulch and root into the fabric, and it makes it more of a problem than it had previously been. So this is an example of weed cloth gone bad. I like to say that weed cloth becomes weedy cloth over time. So then we have, see the photo on the right. This was a year or two later when they decided just to pull the whole thing out. And when they pulled up the weed cloth, you see what was there underneath. Everything was dead, dead, dead. Had still had a couple of plants that were living, but everything else was dead. Scenes like these are unfortunately very common in my neighborhood. If you use weed cloth in combination with your plantings, basically the plants are doomed. When I used to consult with the public, and I don't do that anymore, but when I used to, and somebody would call me and say, "Hey, my plants are dying. Can you come check my irrigation?" First thing I would ask them is, do you have weed cloth in your landscape? And if they said yes, I would say, well, you don't need me. It's the weed cloth that's killing your plants, not the irrigation. Well, actually, the irrigation could possibly be the culprit as well. But the weed cloth is really bad for plants. It's bad in so many ways. In a blog post, Dr. Downer described landscape fabrics and weed cloth as landscape pollutants that don't break down easily and have a bad impact on all forms of life. I couldn't agree more. So here's an example of a mulched and natural landscape area. It's in somebody's front yard, but could very well be the understory of a forest with leaf litter on the ground. Artificial turf. Now, artificial turf is not mulch, and artificial turf is harmful in many ways, harmful to the environment, harmful to the soil and the microbes in the soil. So I'm actually not going to go through these bullet points, but I'm just going to let this sit here for a few moments and let you scan it. Okay, mulch and fire safety. Check the fire safety requirements for your area with respect to mulch. The most basic firescaping recommendation is to not put organic mulch within 5 feet of a building. And you can see that in this graphic, and that is this zone 0 here, the 5 feet around the building. Now, there is a huge body of information out there provided by UCANR UCANR and various Master Gardener counties. A simple Google search will provide you with all you need to know. But definitely check your local codes with respect to mulch. Water conservation. As a landscape manager, I I track drought and rainfall statistics very closely. I show here I'm showing the drought monitor patterns from 2001 to 2021. And this is from the Drought Monitor website. So these are the drought maps for for 2001 to 2021, and each of these is from November of its respective year that it's labeled with. Now, here's how the color coding goes for these maps. White is not dry, yellow is abnormally dry, beige is moderate drought, orange is severe drought, red is extreme drought, and brown is exceptional drought. Now, the reason I have this slide up is because we are not in drought right now, and we haven't been since early last year. So we need to keep the mindset and understand that we are in drought most of the time. And in fact, with these maps here, what I wanted to point out is that there are only 5 years during this time span in this century when we were not in some level of drought. We've got 2005 and 6, we have 2010 and 11, and we've got 2017. Otherwise, all the rest of the years we were in some level of drought. That's 16 of 21 years, which is 76% of the time. So I really want to make the point that drought will come back around and we need to be ready for it. Now, the 1-2 punch of water conservation in the landscape is mulch and low water plants. For optimum landscape water efficiency, these two pieces together will turbocharge your water conservation efforts. What you can do is you can either use truly low water plants in your landscape, or you can just water your landscape as if all of your plants were low water plants. Now, I strongly recommend using California native plants because they're adapted to California. So they're what is referred to as climate ready plants or climate appropriate plants. And so I strongly recommend that you use California native plants. And how great is it to have a California feel, a sense of place, and to know that once those plants are established in your landscape, they'll thrive when that next drought comes along. It's a beautiful thing. So one great source for California native plants is the Calscape Plant Search. You can easily find plants that would thrive in your area. Just put in your zip code and click search. So I put in my zip code. I live in Richmond. Put in my zip code, and then I filtered by the water use of the plants. So you see over on the left here, you can open this water drop down and choose extremely low, very low, and low water plants. And when I did that, I got 2,300 suggested plants. Wow. I think that's enough for me to choose from. And if you're fine with Mediterranean plants as well as natives, this web service provided by the Contra Costa Water District is a great resource as well. And East Bay Mud also has plentiful low water plant lists on their website. Now, rainfall is measured in inches, and plant water requirement is measured in inches. So this is really convenient because what we can do with that is we can compare the rainfall that happens in any given area to the actual plant water requirement of different types of plants. So what I've done here with this slide is that I have the rainfall, the annual rainfall that fell in Union City from 2002 to 2023. Now, I chose Union City because it was the closest weather station to Contra Costa County that actually goes back that far to 2002. The rest of the weather stations in this county didn't go far enough back. So I chose Union City. So what I have here is the number, the rainfall in inches for each of these years. And we have along the left, we have 10 inches, 20 inches, and 30 inches. So then I can plot the water use of the plants, the water requirements of the plants onto the chart. So high water plants in Union City, California need 35.2 inches a year. So you can see that the rainfall that happened did not support high water plants at all. So how about moderate water plants? Well, only 2 years out of these 21 years would have supported moderate water plants. So what I'm looking for here is for rainfall itself alone to support the plants in the landscape, just like what happens out in the wild, okay? Because I want to try to mimic that. I want to go with no irrigation if possible. So then let's click this one more time and we have low water plants now, the plant water requirement. Now I should say here that low water plants require a quarter of the water that high water plants require. So if we were to multiply this 8.8 by 4, we would get 35.2. So low water plants, now we can see here that the rainfall in California indeed does support low water plants. That's why this slide has the title, California is a low water plant state. Low water plants, that's what you see when you go out in the wild, is low water plants. Those are the plants that are adapted to our dry summers and wet winters. Unless it's the understory of a forest or it's a riparian area. But predominantly, California is a low water plant state. So let me click this one more time, and we have one more line here, and it's low water plants with at least 1 inch of mulch spread over the planted area. This is from a study that was done at Texas A&M University, where they found that 1 inch of mulch spread over a planted area lowers the plant water requirement by 25%. So that's what this purple line represents, 25% less than low water plants. And you can see that indeed the rainfall in every single year would have supported that. Even in this lowest rainfall year, which this was only 7 inches of rainfall here. Okay. Now this one is just like the last one, only it's a span of 12 months instead of 21 years. So this is from January to December. And again, the blue bars represent the rainfall for each of the months of the year in inches. And I plotted the water use, the plant water requirement for the top one is high. This one is moderate. And then we have the green one is low and the orange one underneath is low with 1 inch of mulch. So this is really interesting because what we can see is that for high water and moderate water plants, rainfall alone would take care of those plants November, December, January, February, and March, 5 months out of the year. But the low water plants would be supported October, November, December, January, February, March, April, and half of May. So 7.5 months rainfall alone would support low water plants. So the challenge here is that the rain falls at a time of year mainly that the plants don't really need it. So the challenge is, how do we hold on to that water? You see all this water that fell. We need to try to catch it and store it. Okay. How do we hold on to that water? Well, if you want to store water, what you do is you find a container. Here's a container. We can put water in that container and we put a lid on that container. We put a lid on it. That's how we hold on to the water. We put a lid on it. On. Well, my friends, mulch is the lid on the landscape. I'm going to repeat that. Mulch is the lid on the landscape. Okay. The reason it is the lid on the landscape is that it reduces the amount of water that is allowed to leave the soil through evaporation. And that is mainly what's responsible for the plant water requirement. The water leaves the soil and then we need to replace it. Somebody needs to replace it. And that would be us or the irrigation. So mulch is the lid on the landscape. Now, it's commonly quoted that increasing the soil organic matter content by only 1% will help the soil hold 20,000 gallons more water per acre. Now, that's a scale that is really hard to work with and hard to visualize. So I brought it down to 1,000 square feet. At this scale, at 1,000 square feet, if you were to apply a cover of at least 3 inches of mulch, that 1,000 square feet would, after the microbes do their work in the soil, that soil would be able to store 460 gallons more than it could before. That's 9 50-gallon drums of water. This is big. This is big. And believe it or not, this photo actually represents 1,000 square feet of landscape here. I know that because it's my mother's side yard and I measured it. So this is how we can leverage that free water falling from the sky to provide water to our landscapes well into or even through the summer, depending on where you live. Increasing soil microbial activity. It's commonly quoted that a teaspoon of healthy soil contains more organisms than there are people on the earth, around 8 billion organisms. So here's a fun thing. People can generally count up to 150 in 30 seconds. So if you were to set about counting the microbes in this teaspoon of healthy soil, you set about counting them and you just kept counting until you finished. You didn't take any breaks, you didn't sleep, you didn't eat, nothing. You just count until you're finished. It would take you 6.5 years to count all of those microbes in that teaspoon of healthy soil. Is that cool or what? Healthy living soils are teeming with beneficial bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, insects, worms, other organisms, not to mention the mycorrhizal fungi that develop around the plant roots, permitting the plants to obtain additional water and nutrients they wouldn't otherwise have access to. Build it and they will come. Spread arbor chips on your landscape and watch it transform into a compost factory as it calls forth the microbes who go to work to consume it. They're just turning mulch becomes compost over time. And how does it do that? It's the microbes. Very cool stuff. A healthy living soil collaborates with the plants, and together they create productive gardens, resilient landscapes, and a regenerative planet. All the buzzwords are there. Here's a fun quote I found in my research. Healthy soil contains about 8 billion organisms in a teaspoon. Depleted soil contains about 50. Okay. In addition to saving water, improving soil, combating pests, and stopping weeds, wood mulch actually reduces the release of a greenhouse gas that's 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Craig Nichol is the principal investigator in the University of British Columbia 2-year mulch study. In this study, when comparing bare soil nitrous oxide emissions to those of mulched areas, the emissions were cut up to 28%. The mulched areas also showed a 74% reduction in soil nitrates, which are the source of nitrous oxide emissions and can leach into the groundwater. California Natural Resources Agency is spearheading a campaign to reverse climate change and aims to achieve carbon neutrality in California by 2045. One of the many best practices they're instituting to reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere is, guess what? Mulching. Now, this table is from Dr. Downer's 2020 webinar. The changes of note here are the saturation percentage, which is the amount of water held in the soil, goes up to 48.4% from 44.4. The nitrogen level goes up, the phosphorus level goes up, the potassium level goes up, the sodium level goes down, and the carbon level goes up. Do you see the NPK here? Do you think we can stop buying fertilizer? This is a graphical representation of the previous slide. Dr. Downer states with this slide that it is a proportional relationship. The more mulch you put down, the more resulting nutrients that are added to the soil. And the sweet spot for weed suppression is 3 to 4 inches. He also states that contrary to popular belief, mulches do not draft nitrogen from the underlying soil. Uncomposted, chopped plants will add significant amounts of plant-required minerals to underlying soils. And this is not about what's in the mulch itself. It's what ends up in the soil later once the mulch breaks down. This is the work of the soil microbes. Allelopathy. First, let me define allelopathy. I'm even surprised I can say it. I had to practice that word. Allelopathy is the suppression of growth of a plant by a toxin released from a nearby plant of the same or another species. Trees known to be allelopathic are not so when they are chipped into mulch. We have eucalyptus, walnut, oaks, sycamore, manzanita, California bay laurel, and others that are known to be allelopathic when they're live plants. Not so when they're mulch. Trees known to harbor pests or pathogens could possibly transfer their problems to the new landscape. However, the pathogens have a hard time surviving the chipping process, Dr. Downer says. Be careful about keeping the soil too wet underneath the mulch. This can promote root pathogens, especially phytophthora. And let's see, we have one more here. Yes, it's best to use mulch generated on site. So use your own tree trimmings. You know what's going on when you use your own. Handling stormwater. Now, this is something that we learned in elementary school, and this is about the hydrologic cycle and the watershed. So this is a graphic of a watershed. So this cycle doesn't really start or end anywhere, it's continuous. But if we were to start at the ocean, in this case, the water evaporates into the atmosphere. It goes from liquid to gas into the atmosphere. It condenses into clouds, and then it falls back down to the earth in the form of precipitation, which is rain or snow. So then once the water falls to the earth again, it either percolates down into the water table or it runs off down and ends back in, it ends up back in that body of water, and the cycle starts again. So what we can do is, now that is, sorry, go back here. Now that is a watershed. That is the function of a watershed. It's how it works. So what we can do is we can treat an individual property as a mini watershed. So what you could do is you could imagine that the roof of the house, of your house, is the snowy mountains. The rain gutters are the rivers and streams. And the landscape is the aquifers. That's where the water is ending up. So unless you're sending that roof water directly out to the gutter and the storm drain, and it goes through that concrete funnel out into the body of water directly. What we really want to do is we want to catch the water that falls on the property, keep it on the property, and we can have it soak into this living sponge of the soil. So it's a living sponge. I have a colleague who likes to say, let's turn our watershed into a water sponge. Okay. So this is passive rainwater harvesting. So that's passive rainwater harvesting is using the landscape itself to catch and hold on to the water. So you can do that either with mulch. The mulch actually turns the landscape into a water holding container that rivals any cistern, tank, or barrel you could buy. Or you could contour or shape or sculpt the landscape to hold on to water as well. So you could make rain gardens, dry creek beds, swales and berms, and just make the shape of the land be really interesting, and also make it so that it slows that water coming down off the roof. It slows it, spreads it out, sinks it down, and stores it. Now, I'd like to suggest a different way of thinking about our sources of water. The standard is just to turn on the tap. That's what we've always done. Turn on the tap, turn on the tap, turn on the irrigation system. But our potable water supply won't always be available for that option. When we're in deep drought, one of the first things to go is the landscape water because it's not deemed as being essential. But if we can wean our landscapes off of their dependence on potable water, then if and when that happens, our landscapes won't be phased at all. So here's the order of preference I'd like to suggest. First, rainwater, first and foremost, either passively captured by the landscape itself or in barrels, tanks, and cisterns. Next, second option, recovered water. Recovered water from the house, repurposed water, that warm up water that you can catch in a bucket, take it outside and water plants with it. Could be gray water, laundry to landscape. Could be recycled water from either your water district, sanitary district, or the city. And as a last resort, potable water, not a first resort. So we're turning this thing on its head, basically. So that potable water either piped in from the public supply or from a well on the property. Now, where do we get this mulch? Where should we get it? One thing that you can do is you can have a local tree company do pruning on your property. You may already have a tree company that does pruning on your property. So next time they do their pruning, have them chip it there, but don't haul it away to the landfill. Have them leave it so that you can use it on your landscape. Another thing that you can do that Greg came up with, and he said he does this quite a bit, is that he'll see neighbors who are having tree work done. And then he'll just ask the arborist to say, hey, I'd love to have that chipped mulch when after you chip it, can you drop it off at my house? And he said that he gets loads of mulch that way. Now these are free. This is free stuff. Just like rainfall water is free. Free, 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 free. Okay. So another thing that you can do is you can, if you do your own pruning, you can collect the prunings, the trimmings in a part of the yard, and then you can hire somebody to come in, a chipping service to come in and chip it for you. There are lots of options. There are, as a master gardener, I'm not supposed to tell you about chipdrop.com. I just said it. Oh, I didn't. But there are services there are web services that will connect you with a local arborist that will drop mulch for you. Now, do be forewarned that if you do that, you are going to get a boatload of mulch. Okay. You can't say, bring me 2 yards of mulch, because it could be 2 yards, but more likely it'll be 15 to 20. So you can't really say how much mulch it's going to be, and usually it is a boatload. And I had said earlier that doing this is a community builder. We do this in our neighborhood. We have people around the corner who get regular shipments of mulch in their driveway, great big piles, and we go and get the mulch. I don't know how many other neighbors do it, but it's really a beautiful thing. It's a community builder. So got to be careful about that. Now, I did want to, let's see, I did want to go back up to this one up here, because I forgot to say something really important about this slide. When I asked you to change the order of preference of water source. And I'd like to give you 3 really strong reasons why rainwater should be our first choice. Number 1, it hasn't been treated with any chemicals. Okay, the drinking water supply has chemicals in it because it's for human consumption. Our water has chloramine and fluoride in it. I don't think that is the best for the soil, the microbes, the plants. Okay, that's one reason. Another reason is that rainwater is free. It's free. And reason number 3, we get to preserve our precious water supply in California. All right, so then let me go head down here. One more thing to tell you about before we bring Greg out from behind the curtain, and that is that the water districts, especially East Bay Mud and Contra Costa Water District, they have rebate programs where they give you coupons to get discounts on mulch. Now, I had put this coupon on this slide because, hey, you get coupons in the rebate programs, but then I noticed that it's for bark mulch. So I don't recommend that you use bark mulch, because bark mulch doesn't have all those juicy benefits that the arbor chips do. But I wanted to tell you about this in case you go ahead and you just really want the bark mulch. Just know that you won't have all those wonderful benefits that we have with the other choices, mainly the arbor chips or the getting the chips from a waste management facility. That the bark mulch is going to be a bit different. Okay, so I just really want you to be aware of that. Okay, so then it is time to bring Greg out from behind the curtain. Greg wants to talk at you a little bit. So, Greg, I'm going to go ahead and go off of video so that this can be your show for a little bit.
Okay. You can leave me out here all by myself, twisting in the wind. Thanks, Lori.
All right, all
You
right.
can go ahead and move to the next slide.
Okay, you got it.
So I'm just going to do a few add-ons based on my personal experience to what Lori's already been going over. So the first thing I want to show is what a difference mulch makes on the ground. So I work every week at our garden, the demonstration garden in Walnut Creek. And one of the days last year, it was about an 85-degree day. I brought my infrared thermometer, my pizza oven thermometer, to see the soil temperatures. And so you can see on this, on bare ground, the temperature was 132 degrees on an 85-degree day. So really, really brought the temperature up. And when you think that most organisms die at 140, that ground's really hot. And even the surface of the straw on one of the beds that we did have straw there, it was still 126. So still very warm, just the surface of the straw. And in that same spot, I cleared the mulch away, and the soil was a moist 75 degrees, which is right in the sweet spot of what you want for growing vegetables, somewhere between, say 75 and 85. Okay, next slide. And so there's been a number of questions about the types of mulch, and Lori went over that pretty well. And so here's a couple different versions for vegetable gardens. And so at our garden, we use primarily straw. It's relatively inexpensive, which is the picture on the left. It's relatively inexpensive, and we can do the whole garden, all 30 beds, with about 2 bales. Goes a long way. And when the season's over, it tends to mat down when it's watered, and you can just kind of roll it up. And so we ended up using it regularly, or over and over again. The picture in the top middle is grass clippings. That's a neighbor of mine's house, where what he does is he lets his lawn grow a little bit long. He doesn't use any chemicals on it. And when he mows the lawn, he uses it to mulch the beds and his beds, and he goes a good 3 or 4 inches thick, and it works out really well. He says it feeds the soil all summer. The bed soil is just terrific. We got a couple of questions about using leaves, whether they're shredded or not. And that's what I used at my house for a number of years. And that's the picture on the bottom, just covering the soil with some of the leaves I rake off the lawn. Really simple way to do it. It's not the tidiest look, but it does work well in keeping the moisture in. And then another way you can go on the right there is using wood chips. And so if you're going to use, it gives a nice tidy appearance. These were actually the purchased wood chips that come in a bag, not bark, but wood chips that go through a second grinding. And so they're smaller and a little tidier than what you might get from an arborist. But those give a nice tidy surface over the beds. The downside of doing that is they're kind of a nuisance to rake off when you're flipping the bed to the next crop, and you don't want to be turning the wood product into the soil, because it does tend to suck nitrogen out of the soil when it's turned under, and so you don't want to do that. Okay, next slide. And so there were several questions about sheet mulching. Here's how I've done it at my house. I've cut my lawn, my front and back lawn, my front lawn by half, my back lawn probably by a third. And I just did it by sheet mulching. No rototillers, no turning the soil, no grass killer, none of that stuff. So you mow the lawn down tight. You can use cardboard, and I've done that in some parts of my yard. In this particular instance, I use newspaper, a couple of sheets thick. The advantage, I think, of newspaper is that it tends to break down faster. Newspaper these days is almost like rice paper, the way it dissolves. And it's a little easier to cut and manage. And so 3 years ago, I took out this section of the lawn, and within a couple months, and did 3 to 4 inches of mulch on top of that. And then here, this is a picture from about 2 months ago on the right, with it all planted in and looking a little bit overgrown, kind of going from cottage garden to cottage jungle in the look there, but very simple to do. You don't need to rototiller it up. You just smother the grass and then add the mulch over the top to prevent any sunlight from getting through there. All right, next slide. And so this is the difference that's made. In over the last 3 years, my water usage has dropped about 35%. And I live by myself, but when for 6 months of the year, when I'm not doing any irrigation, I'm down to about 60 gallons a day, which is really nothing. It shoots up. It shot up last month with all the heat, but my overall usage has dropped about 35%. And this isn't doing a bunch of crazy stuff. This is doing pretty simple things, making the lawn smaller, wood chipping around all my beds and all my plantings, planting low water plants, so salvias and lavenders. What else I've got out there? Status and yarrow. But I still have a half a dozen rose bushes in the front and probably 20 in the back. The other thing I do is I rarely water the front lawn. It doesn't show from the street really. And so I tend to just let it go brown. And then with the first rain, it comes right back up. So next slide. And with that, I'll turn it back to Lori.
All right. So I have a call to action for you. And let's see. So if you're not willing to go whole hog, do the citizen scientist thing and try conducting an experiment. So here's the experiment. Whoops. Click it. Come on. You can click. Here we go. There we go. Conduct an experiment. Pick an area of the landscape. Order a load of chipped tree trimmings. Then what you want to do before you put the mulch down is saturate the area really, really well. Make sure that you get that water in there down to the deepest roots that are in there. So really, truly saturate that area. And then once it's saturated, if there's irrigation to that area, just go ahead and disconnect it or take it off the schedule or whatever. So you're not going to use irrigation in here. Go ahead and apply a layer of mulch 4 inches deep to the area. Okay. And then every now and then, actually, you can just sit back and wait and watch, because now you have basically created a compost factory. And you are calling the microbes, calling all microbes, here they come, that nature is going to come and get that mulch. And wonderful stuff is going to happen. So I suggest that you don't irrigate it, just leave it and sit back and enjoy. But do check the moisture level now and then with a moisture meter. Just one of those moisture meters that we use to check house plants with. And so I told my partner that I wanted to do this because we have an area on the far side of the driveway that is not hooked up to the irrigation system. And it's a pretty big area actually, and we've been throwing our warm up water out there all the time. So I figured this would be a perfect place to do this test because we have a guy around the corner with a great big pile of mulch in his driveway that we've been partaking of. And so we're going to do that. And she asked me, she said, so we put that mulch down and it's mid-July. When do you think we'll need to water plants? And what I think, because we live in Richmond, what I think is that we won't need to water anything. Once we get that 4 inches of mulch down, we're done. I'm pretty sure we'll be done. We'll be checking because there are a lot of plants over there on the other side of the driveway, and we'll check it. But I believe that we won't need to water it again, that it'll be fine until it starts raining again, which is probably about 3.5 months from now, mid-July, August, September, October. 3.5 to 4 months from now, I think it'll be okay. So I suggest you do this citizen science experiment or just go whole hog. That would be fine too. All right. So we actually do have oh, and then there was one more thing. So what you could also do is explore where you can reroute the downspouts into the landscape so that you can slow that water coming off the roof, spread it out, sink it down, and store it.